I'm awake, still functioning, barely. Alrighty, so this is A.T. Hagan. We interrupt this program for number, whatever it is, section on. I'm leaving the sections when I do the auto insert. I'm leaving the section things in there. So when I get around to eventually doing a playlist and numbering them and all, I will actually have them numbered for posterity's sake. And remember, for posterity's sake. So be honest. Okay. So this is the end of the beginning, part 2. I'm assuming that we just read the end of the beginning, part 1. Yes, that's true. Okay. All right, because some of these are just like, it's part 2, and I'm like, what happened to part 1? The sun was just beginning to lighten the sky when he'd made it home last Monday morning, and he was surprised to see Anne up and with her bags packed on the bed. For a bad moment, he'd gotten the idea that she was leaving him! Exclamation point. She laughed when he expressed this thought and said, "No, darling, this is the surprise I've been trying to tell you about. The university wants me to come back to work." Fatigue and sleep deprivation made it all seem unreal to him as she explained the deal she'd negotiated with the university and what it meant to the family. He still hadn't liked the idea and wasn't going to agree, but she sat him down and laid it all out for him in step-by-step fashion. "John, we need this. No one in the family is working. We have no income coming in. You yourself have told us that it'll be next spring before we have anything that we can sell from what we produce ourselves. The federal moratorium on mortgages, rents, loans, and other debts also froze our bank account, presuming the loss of New York and the other cities wouldn't have eliminated it anyway. With inflation spiraling higher and higher, the cash money we have left on hand is worth less every day. We need the income. What's more, I managed to dicker with the vice president to allow us to use some of the implements and other equipment from the extension farm, so you can expand our plantings here, and we'll get seed and other stuff out of it as well. This could put us years ahead of what we'd be able to do otherwise. Besides, with me being in town all week, eating the university's food, it'll take some of the strain off of our food supply. That taking a new mouth in would place on us. The last one puzzled him, so he said, "What new mouth?" She laughed again. "Why, Brittany, of course. You brought her here yourself. Have you forgotten about her?" In truth, he had, but he replied, "Why should she figure into this? She doesn't live here. Her father will pick her up when he gets home." A serious expression crossed her face. "John, it's going on 7 a.m. Monday morning. Her father hasn't come home yet. At least we haven't heard from him." "If you'd come home and found me murdered and your neighbor told you that Melinda was at a neighbor's house, wouldn't you go get her right away?" "Well, yeah," he said, a little confused. "You mean he's never showed up yet?" "No, John, he hasn't. What's more, nobody has shown up to do anything about Mrs. Tearsdale's body either. Lisa and I think he's missing, or maybe run off and abandoned his wife and child. May not even know his wife has been murdered, but we think he's missing." John said with tired passion. And it was just like blank, 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 blank. Probably damn, I don't know. It said a lot of worse things. "All right, Lord God, I hope this won't turn out to be a double murder. Maybe that's how the bastard knew to go to that particular house. I'll have to call this into County Central. They're supposed to come and deal with the crime scene, though I don't know what's left to do other than clean up. With the riots and all, God, it was only last night. I suppose they haven't had time to do it yet. I'll call them this morning before I go to bed and goose them. But what about Brittany? Why are you counting her into our food situation? Even if her father doesn't come home, she's got relatives she can go to, doesn't she? Maybe family, friends, somebody?" Anne shook her head. "Yes, she's got relatives, but they're in Maryland. On the map, it looks like they may have been far enough west that the tsunamis may not have taken them, but how would they come and get her? The two families she might go stay with are even worse off than her family was. Do you think they'd take her? We thoroughly explored all of the possibilities last night. Melinda, Lisa, Heather, and I discussed this after Lisa gave Brittany a sedative and put her to bed. We want her to stay here, John, at least until we can locate relatives who have a responsibility to her. We don't want to just send her off to some orphanage or something. Where would she go? Into the camps? It would be kinder to just shoot her. She can do some of the work that Melinda and Heather do, and I won't be here during the week, so she won't be a burden on the food supply. I might even be able to bring home food from the university maybe, or something. She stays here. John was so tired that he felt dizzy and not up to this contention with his wife, so he let the matter drop until he'd had some sleep. He realized later that day, after he'd awoken, that this meant it would have to wait all week until she came home, unless they could settle this over the phone. This she simply refused to do, and by the time she'd made it home Friday night, the entire matter had set up like concrete, and he realized he faced the immovable object of the united front of the house females. Well, he finally conceded, we'll just have to make it work somehow. Mike pulled up behind him just as John reached his gate, and he got out of his car. "See you Tuesday morning, Mac," he said to the driver, who turned and went back the way he'd come. "Hi, John. I've got your paperwork. Guess what? I get tomorrow off. First damn day I've had off since the rock hit. I've got your paperwork, too. Come on in and let's have a look at it. Want to stay for supper? Kate will feed you some of your eggs." John smiled and said, "I appreciate it, Mike, but Anne's going back in the morning, so I'll eat at the house. Maybe another time. I've been on the back of the tractor all day, so I'm about filthy and dog-tired to boot. Let me sign off on the Tearsdale case so I can go home and clean up." "Okay," the deputy grinned. "I reckon I can't compete with your wife, especially when she's gone all week. That Tearsdale mess was a nasty business. I'm sorry it fell to you to have to deal with it. Near as we can tell, we think Mr. Tearsdale may have run into Nelson at the Archer Market, since men hang out there looking for day work. Still no trace of him, though, so we're still not sure if Nelson murdered him, or maybe he just didn't run off, as some of the nastier gossip would have it. I never met the man, but from talking to the neighbors, I don't think he'd just up and run off. We'll find him sooner or later, probably in a shallow grave." The sector deputy nodded his head. "Yeah, I don't think he ran off either. What a crappy world it is sometimes, but it's happening all over. Brittany seems to be taking it as well as can be expected. With Mel and Heather to keep her company and plenty of chores and responsibilities, she doesn't seem to dwell on it too much. Any news down at the apartment?" "Well, as a matter of fact," Mike allowed, "there is. Word about your dog hunt got around to the recovery HQ, and they'd like to send some folks out when you do the next one. Feral dogs have become a serious threat down to Orlando and some of the other larger cities. They want to watch the way y'all did it so they can show it to the folks down south. When do you reckon you'll do it again?" "Dan and Ed was talking about doing another one next week, probably Saturday or Sunday sometime. Right now, everybody's too busy planting. Dad shot a dog in the pasture this afternoon, so it's looking to be time again. Tell him to come on out. We can always use more hands." "Okay, I'll pass that on. Oh, and here's a heads up for you. Levy County Sheriff's Office put the word out there was a cross burning in Raleigh last night, and someone shot into the houses of a couple of black residents. Raleigh being just to the south of Archer, they wanted us to know in case whoever did it comes north." With a sigh of disgust, John said, "Well, if that don't just take the cake. Here we are. Everyone's trying to keep from starving. We've got thieves and murderers to deal with, and those ignorant yahoos in bed sheets want to stick their heads up. There's at least 12 black families in my sector alone. 3 of the men on the posse here are black, and these folks are all just trying to stay alive like we are. And of course, with you being gone 12 hours a day every day, who is going to have to deal with it? Me. Anyone starts cross-burning or shooting into houses around here should count themselves lucky if all they get is an ass shot full of birdshot." With a grin, Mike said, "I knew you'd take the news calmly," and then laughed. "Levy County said they had a good idea of who'd done it, but they wanted to put the word out just in case. The sheriff wants this squashed too, so if it crosses the county line, he's going to come down on it like a ton of bricks." The men hung up the range slickers and went into the house. John sat at the kitchen table reading the paperwork, asking Mike about procedure and making corrections. In the background, the radio was on, but he gave it only half an ear. The federal and state governments were creating a program called the National Reconstruction Corps for the evacuees presently trapped in the camps and for anyone else unable to find work. They'd be used in the salvage operations in the devastated areas and to rebuild damaged infrastructure resulting from the earthquakes and flooding. With the fuel shortage, much work that would have once been done by machinery would now have to be done by hand. The Corps wouldn't pay much relative to pre-impact wages, but at least they'd all eat, be clothed, and have a place to live during the coming winter. It sounded rugged, but given the alternative, it presented an attractive option. He was doing more physical labor now himself than he'd ever had to do before. The paperwork reviewed and signed, John put his range slicker on and headed back home. There'd be the usual alarms and difficulties to deal with tomorrow, but for tonight he was going to take a hot shower, get dry, eat a good supper, then share a week's worth of company with his wife before she went back to the university.